The morning secret of Jesus. Before the crowds came, before the miracles, before the teachings that would shake the religious world, Jesus disappeared. Not once, not occasionally, but again and again and again. The Gospels quietly repeat the same detail. Very early in the morning, before sunrise, Jesus went to pray. But have you ever wondered something? Why would the Son of God need to pray like this every day? What was happening during those quiet moments before dawn? Because the disciples noticed something unusual. They watched him pray. They saw the peace in his mind. They saw the clarity in his decisions. And one day, they asked him a question. Not how to perform miracles, not how to gather crowds, not how to preach powerful sermons. They asked something far more revealing. They said, "Lord, teach us to pray." Why? Because they saw something in his prayer life that produced extraordinary wisdom. But here is the mystery. Jesus didn't just pray randomly. He followed a pattern, a rhythm, a spiritual structure that prepared his mind and heart every morning. A pattern that modern believers rarely talk about. A pattern hidden inside the ancient language Jesus spoke. And once you understand this pattern, you may never approach prayer the same way again. But before we reveal the first part of that hidden pattern, there is something important you need to realize about the way most people pray today. Because the biggest mistake believers make in prayer is also the reason many prayers feel powerless. And the difference between those prayers and the way Jesus prayed may surprise you. Why most prayers feel powerless. For many people, prayer begins the same way. God, help me. God, fix this. God, change that. Prayer becomes a list of requests, a spiritual to-do list. But when we study the prayer life of Jesus, something completely different appears. Jesus rarely began with requests. Instead, he began with alignment. He didn't rush to ask God for things. He first aligned his heart with God's presence. This difference may seem small, but it changes everything. Because prayer was never meant to be only about asking. Prayer was meant to be about connecting, about realigning the human heart with divine wisdom. And once that alignment happens, something incredible begins to grow. Clarity, peace, discernment. But the question still remains, how did Jesus create that alignment every morning? The answer lies in something most people skip entirely. Something that feels uncomfortable in a noisy world. Something powerful. Silence. But this silence was not empty. It was the doorway to wisdom. And understanding this silence is the first step to rediscovering the lost prayer pattern of Jesus. The silence before the words. Imagine the world before sunrise. The air is still. The noise of the day has not begun. In that quiet moment, the mind is different, slower, clearer, more open. This is why Jesus prayed early, not because it was a religious rule, but because silence prepares the mind for wisdom. Ancient Jewish traditions understood this. They believed that stillness allowed the heart to become aware of God's presence. But Jesus took this idea deeper than anyone before him, because his prayers were not just about speaking, they were about listening. And this listening produced something extraordinary, the kind of wisdom that amazed even his enemies. But to understand how this worked, we need to explore something hidden in the language Jesus spoke. Because the first key of the lost prayer pattern is connected to an ancient Aramaic word, a word that completely changes how we understand prayer. The first key, the awareness of presence. The word is Shemya. In Aramaic, Shemya refers to heaven, but it also carries a deeper meaning. It describes the living presence of God. When Jesus prayed, he didn't begin by asking God to come near. He began by recognizing that God was already near. Think about that. Instead of trying to reach heaven, Jesus started by becoming aware of heaven's presence around him. This awareness changed everything. Because once the mind becomes aware of God's presence, fear begins to fade, confusion begins to settle, and wisdom begins to emerge. But awareness alone was not enough. Because after recognizing God's presence, Jesus moved into the second stage of the pattern, a stage that many believers completely overlook. And skipping this stage may be the reason so many people struggle to hear God's direction in their lives. Alignment before requests. After awareness came alignment. This is where prayer shifts from talking to transformation. Instead of asking God to change circumstances, Jesus aligned his heart with God's will. We see this clearly in the Garden of Gethsemane. When facing the greatest suffering of his life, Jesus prayed, "Not my will, but yours be done." That moment reveals the heart of true prayer. Prayer is not about control. Prayer is about surrender. But surrender does something powerful. It removes inner conflict. It brings peace to the mind. And once that surrender happens, wisdom begins to flow. But there was still another element in the prayer pattern of Jesus, something deeply connected to the human body itself, something hidden inside every breath. And understanding this final element unlocks the full power of the pattern. The breath of prayer. In Aramaic, another important word appears, ruha. Ruha means breath, but it also means spirit and life. Ancient believers understood something profound. Breath connects the physical body and the spiritual soul. So prayer often included intentional breathing, slow breathing, focused breathing, breathing that reminded the heart of God's presence. This practice calmed the mind, it centered the heart, and it allowed wisdom to remain throughout the day. But there is still one more piece of the puzzle. Because wisdom does not grow through prayer alone, it grows through what happens after prayer. And the life of Jesus shows exactly how this wisdom appeared in real situations. Situations that would confuse or trap most people. When wisdom faces traps. The religious leaders constantly tried to trap Jesus. They asked complicated questions. They created impossible situations. They hoped he would make a mistake. But again and again, Jesus responded with calm wisdom. Once they asked him about paying taxes to Caesar. If he said yes, the people would hate him. If he said no, Rome could accuse him of rebellion. It was a perfect trap. Yet Jesus simply asked for a coin and said, "Give to Caesar what belongs to Caesar, and give to God what belongs to God." In one sentence, the trap collapsed. But answers like this do not appear by accident. They grow from a disciplined mind, a mind prepared through prayer, a mind shaped by stillness and alignment. And this wisdom did not begin with Jesus, because centuries earlier, another man asked God for wisdom, and his request changed history. Solomon's request. When God appeared to Solomon in a dream, he offered him anything he desired: wealth, power, victory. But Solomon asked for something different. He asked for wisdom, the ability to discern between right and wrong. God honored that request, and Solomon became famous for his wisdom. But here is something fascinating. Jesus took that same desire for wisdom and made it a daily discipline. Every morning, prayer became preparation. Preparation to think clearly, to respond wisely, to walk through life with discernment. But wisdom requires something most people struggle to practice: patience. And the life of Jesus reveals how powerful patience can be. Knowledge is not wisdom. There is something many people misunderstand about wisdom. They assume wisdom simply means knowing a lot of things. But knowledge and wisdom are not the same. Knowledge fills the mind with information. Wisdom teaches the heart how to use that information. You can know many facts about life and still make terrible decisions. But a wise person can see through confusion. They recognize truth even when it hides behind complicated situations. And when we observe the life of Jesus, we notice something remarkable. Again and again, people tried to confuse him. They questioned him, they challenged him, they tested him. But his answers were never rushed. They were calm, clear, and filled with insight. This is why the crowds often said something astonishing. They asked one another, "Where did this man get such wisdom?" The answer was not in books, it was not in status, it was formed during those quiet hours before sunrise. But there is something else that grows during silence besides wisdom, and understanding that hidden process may explain why Jesus protected his morning prayers so carefully. What happens to the mind in silence? Imagine a lake during a storm. The wind shakes the surface, the water becomes chaotic, and when you look into the lake, you cannot see anything beneath the surface.
But when the wind stops, when the water becomes still, everything becomes visible. The human mind works exactly the same way. When life is full of noise, stress, and constant activity, the mind becomes restless. Clarity disappears. Decisions become emotional. But when the mind becomes quiet, truth becomes visible. This is why silence was such an important part of the prayer life of Jesus. Those quiet morning moments were not empty. They were moments when the mind could settle, when fears could fade, when the heart could become aware of God's presence. But silence also reveals something many people are not prepared for. Because when the noise disappears, we begin to notice the thoughts inside our own hearts. And sometimes, those thoughts are uncomfortable. The struggle with stillness. Many people try silent prayer for the first time and feel frustrated. Their mind begins racing, memories appear, worries rise. They assume something is wrong. But in reality, this is the beginning of clarity. Silence reveals what noise hides. And once those thoughts appear, they can be released. Jesus understood this process. This is why he often withdrew from crowds, not once, not occasionally, but frequently. Silence became a daily discipline, a way of preparing the mind before facing the challenges of the day. But there was another reason Jesus prayed so early, a reason connected to the rhythm of the human mind itself. And understanding this rhythm may explain why early morning prayer has been practiced for thousands of years. The sacred hour before sunrise. Before the sun rises, something unique happens. The world is quiet. Distractions have not yet begun. The mind is calm. Ancient spiritual traditions called this time the sacred hour, a moment when the heart is most open to reflection. Jesus understood this rhythm deeply. He stepped away from the noise of the world before it began. Those moments became a foundation, a daily reset for the mind. But what makes this even more fascinating is what happened after those prayers. Because once Jesus finished praying, he walked into the day with extraordinary calm. Even when people tried to trap him, even when crowds demanded miracles, even when enemies challenged his authority. And one moment in particular reveals just how powerful that wisdom became. The trap that failed. One day, religious leaders approached Jesus with a question designed to trap him. They asked whether people should pay taxes to Caesar. It was a clever trap. If Jesus supported the tax, the people might turn against him. If he rejected it, the Roman authorities could accuse him of rebellion. But Jesus did not react emotionally. He paused. He asked for a coin. Then he said something remarkable. "Whose image is on this coin?" They answered, "Caesar's." And Jesus replied, "Give to Caesar what belongs to Caesar, and give to God what belongs to God." With one sentence, the trap collapsed. The crowd was amazed. The religious leaders were silent. But moments like this reveal something deeper. Wisdom does not rush. Wisdom pauses. And that pause is often created through prayer. But wisdom was not only visible in debates, it was also present in the way Jesus taught people about life. Why Jesus taught in stories. Instead of long lectures, Jesus often used simple stories. Farmers planting seeds, fishermen casting nets, lamps shining in darkness. Why? Because stories invite reflection. A direct statement may be forgotten, but a story lingers in the mind. It invites the listener to think, to question, to discover meaning gradually. And this is how wisdom grows, not through force, but through discovery.
But the greatest test of Jesus' wisdom did not come through debates or teaching. It came during one of the most difficult moments of his life, a moment that revealed the deepest part of his prayer life. The night in the garden. The night before the crucifixion, Jesus went to the Garden of Gethsemane. He knew what was coming. He knew the suffering ahead. And in that moment, he prayed. But his prayer revealed something powerful. He expressed his pain honestly. He asked if the suffering could pass. Yet immediately he said, "Not my will, but yours be done." This moment shows the heart of true prayer. Prayer does not deny our emotions, but it ultimately surrenders our will to God. And that surrender creates peace, even in suffering. But surrender is not easy. It requires trust. And trust is built through daily connection with God. This is why the prayer life of Jesus was not occasional, it was consistent. And over time, that consistency created something remarkable: the power of daily practice. Spiritual strength does not appear overnight, it grows through daily habits. The same is true for wisdom. Each morning prayer became another moment of alignment, another moment of stillness, another moment of clarity. And slowly, that discipline shaped the mind of Jesus. But this pattern was never meant to stay hidden, because the disciples noticed something about it, something that made them ask a question that changed history. The disciples noticed the pattern. After watching Jesus pray many times, the disciples became curious. They sensed that something powerful was happening in those quiet moments. So one day they said, "Lord, teach us to pray." That request reveals something important. They did not ask how to preach, they asked how to pray. Because they understood something. Prayer was the source of wisdom. But the prayer Jesus taught them contained clues hidden inside ancient language, clues that reveal the structure of the lost pattern. The prayer Jesus taught. When the disciples finally asked Jesus how to pray, he gave them words that have echoed across centuries. "Our Father in heaven, hallowed be your name." Millions of people repeat these words every day. But here is something fascinating. The prayer Jesus taught was not just a set of words to repeat. It was a pattern, a structure, a spiritual roadmap. Look carefully at how it begins, not with requests, not with problems, but with recognition. Our Father in heaven. This opening is not about asking, it is about awareness. Awareness that God is already present. Awareness that the one we speak to is not distant, but near. This is the same first step Jesus practiced in his own morning prayers. Presence before requests. But after recognizing God's presence, the prayer moves to something deeper. Something that reveals the second movement of the pattern. The power of alignment. After acknowledging God's presence, the prayer continues, "Your kingdom come, your will be done." Notice the order. Before asking for daily needs, the prayer aligns the heart with God's will. This is the moment where prayer stops being about control and begins becoming about surrender. Many people approach prayer hoping God will follow their plans, but Jesus showed the opposite. True prayer invites us to follow God's plan, and when that alignment happens, something powerful occurs inside the mind. Stress begins to fade, fear begins to loosen its grip, and clarity begins to emerge. But the prayer Jesus taught still has another hidden layer, a layer connected to daily life, because after presence and alignment, something practical appears. Daily bread and daily trust. Give us today our daily bread. At first glance, this seems simple, but it reveals a powerful spiritual truth. Jesus did not teach his followers to pray for endless wealth. He taught them to trust God for what they needed today. Daily bread, daily provision, daily guidance. This mindset changes the way a person approaches life. Instead of worrying about the distant future, the heart learns to trust God one day at a time. And this daily trust brings peace. But there is still another part of the prayer pattern. one that deals with something every human struggles with: the power of forgiveness. Jesus continued the prayer with these words, "Forgive us our debts as we forgive our debtors." This moment shifts the prayer inward. It invites self-examination. It asks the heart to release bitterness, because resentment clouds judgment, anger distorts wisdom. But forgiveness clears the mind. It removes emotional weight that silently controls decisions. And this is why forgiveness is not only spiritual, it is also practical. A heart that forgives becomes free. But the prayer still continues, and the next line reveals something about the spiritual battles every person faces. The moment of temptation. Lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. Life constantly places choices before us. Some choices are obvious, others are subtle. Temptation rarely appears as something clearly evil. It often appears disguised as something attractive, something easy, something convenient. But wisdom recognizes what lies beneath the surface, and prayer strengthens that discernment.
Because when the heart remains connected to God, deception becomes easier to recognize. But the greatest example of this discernment appears in one of the earliest tests Jesus faced: the wilderness test. Before Jesus began his public ministry, he spent 40 days in the wilderness. During that time, he faced temptation, not once, but repeatedly. Each temptation offered something powerful: comfort, power, control. Yet Jesus refused every one of them. Why? Because his mind was clear, his heart was aligned with God, and that clarity came from his deep connection with the Father. But temptation is not limited to dramatic moments like the wilderness. It appears in everyday life, in small decisions, in quiet compromises. And this is why the daily prayer pattern matters. It prepares the heart before temptation appears. Discernment in everyday life. Wisdom is not only needed in great spiritual battles, it is needed in ordinary moments, when deciding what to say, when choosing how to respond, when facing conflict. The life of Jesus shows this again and again. He encountered difficult people, angry critics, confused followers, yet his responses were rarely emotional. They were thoughtful, measured, wise. But wisdom like this does not happen automatically. It grows through practice, through reflection, through daily connection with God. The calm authority of Jesus. One of the most striking things about Jesus was his calm presence. Even in chaos, he remained steady. Storms terrified his disciples, but Jesus slept peacefully in the boat. Crowds shouted, leaders accused him, but his voice remained calm. This calmness was not weakness, it was authority rooted in peace, and that peace was strengthened in prayer. Because prayer reshapes the mind. It creates space between emotion and response, and in that space, wisdom appears. The danger of constant noise. Today, the world is louder than ever. Notifications, messages, endless information. The mind rarely rests. But constant noise weakens clarity. It fills the mind with distraction, and distraction makes wisdom difficult to hear. This is why the quiet mornings of Jesus are so powerful. They remind us that clarity grows in stillness, not in noise. But rediscovering that stillness requires intention. Returning to stillness. Stillness is not something that simply happens. It must be chosen. Each morning offers a moment of decision, to rush into the day, or to pause, to breathe, to become aware of God's presence. This pause may seem small, but its impact grows throughout the day, because a calm beginning creates a calm mind, and a calm mind sees life clearly. Rebuilding a morning practice. You do not need complicated rituals to begin. Start with a few quiet moments. Sit in silence. Become aware of God's presence. Align your heart with His will. Take a slow breath and ask for wisdom. These simple steps mirror the pattern Jesus followed: presence, alignment,
breath. But the real transformation happens when this practice becomes daily. Presence throughout the day. Morning prayer is only the beginning. The awareness of God's presence can continue throughout the day, during work, during conversation, during moments of stress. Each breath can become a reminder that God is near. And when that awareness remains, decisions become clearer. Responding instead of reacting. One of the greatest benefits of this awareness is emotional control. Instead of reacting quickly, the mind pauses. And in that pause, wisdom appears. Many conflicts in life are caused by quick reactions, but a calm mind responds differently. It listens, it reflects, it chooses wisely. The breath prayer. Some believers practice a simple rhythm called the breath prayer, a short phrase repeated quietly with each breath. It may be as simple as, "Lord, guide me." This practice keeps the heart centered. It reminds the mind to return to God's presence, and over time it becomes natural, like breathing itself. Clarity in difficult moments. Life will always bring difficult moments, unexpected problems, painful decisions, moments of uncertainty. But a mind trained through prayer responds differently. Instead of panic, there is reflection. Instead of fear, there is trust. And this difference changes everything. Wisdom in relationships. Wisdom also transforms relationships. It teaches patience. It encourages compassion. It helps us understand others more deeply. And the teachings of Jesus constantly pointed toward love, humility, and forgiveness. Because wisdom is not only intellectual, it is relational. A life shaped by prayer. When prayer becomes a daily rhythm, life slowly changes. Thoughts become clearer, decisions become wiser, peace becomes stronger. And this transformation does not happen through effort alone. It happens through connection with God. The power of small habits. Great spiritual strength often grows from small daily habits. A few minutes of stillness, a few moments of reflection, a few breaths of prayer. Over time, these moments shape the heart, and slowly, wisdom becomes part of everyday life. The return to stillness. Even when life becomes chaotic, stillness remains available. At any moment, a person can pause, take a breath, remember God's presence, and return to clarity. Walking in daily wisdom. This is what the prayer life of Jesus reveals. Wisdom is not reserved for extraordinary people. It is available to anyone willing to seek God daily, anyone willing to pause, anyone willing to listen. The hidden key. The hidden key to wisdom was never complicated. It was simple. Presence, alignment, breath. This pattern shaped the mind of Jesus, and it can shape ours as well. The pattern revealed. Now the pattern becomes clear. Begin with awareness of God. Align your heart with His will. Carry that awareness through every breath. This rhythm transforms the mind. It prepares the heart for wisdom, and it changes the way we walk through life. Your morning decision. Tomorrow morning will arrive like every other day, but you will have a choice. You can rush into noise, or you can begin with stillness. Become aware of God's presence. Align your heart. Take a slow breath and ask for wisdom, because wisdom changes everything. If you are ready to begin this practice tomorrow morning, type "I choose wisdom" in the comments. Your words might inspire someone else to begin the same journey. And if this message helped you see prayer in a new way, make sure to subscribe and turn on the notification bell, because the next video may reveal another hidden spiritual practice from the life of Jesus that many people have forgotten. And once you discover it, your walk with God may never be the same again.